What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks onto a late-night talk show expecting a conversation and instead gets ambushed by a host who thinks he can say anything to anyone? In just 31 seconds of one single comment, everything explodes. This is the night Samuel L. Jackson had enough. The studio lights are hot. The audience is packed in tight. Samuel L. Jackson walks out to massive applause. He's there to promote his latest film, but more than that, he's there to talk about something that matters to him, something real. The crowd loves him. They're on their feet. Bill Maher is at his desk, that smirk already forming on his face, that look that says he thinks he's the smartest person in the room. Samuel sits down. The applause dies down. Bill starts with the usual stuff. "So good to have you here," Bill says. "Big fan of your work." "Appreciate that," Samuel responds. He's relaxed, professional, ready for a normal conversation. But Bill doesn't do normal. Within minutes, he steers away from the movie. He wants to talk politics. He wants to talk about social issues. And here's where it starts to go wrong. "So Samuel," Bill says, leaning back in his chair like he owns the world, "you've been pretty vocal lately about representation in Hollywood. But don't you think we're maybe going a little too far with all this diversity talk? I mean, isn't talent what should matter?" The audience gets quiet. Samuel shifts in his seat. He's heard this before. He knows exactly what Bill is doing. "Bill, talent does matter," Samuel says, his voice steady. "But when you've got an entire industry that's been shutting out talented people for decades just because of what they look like, yeah, we need to talk about it. We need to fix it." Bill waves his hand like he's swatting away a fly. "But see, this is what I'm talking about. Everything is about race now. Can't we just appreciate good acting without making it about skin color? That's easy for you to say." Samuel responds. His tone is still calm, but there's an edge now. "You've never had to worry about whether you'd get a role because of your skin color. You've never been told you're not right for a part because you don't fit what they think America wants to see." The audience claps. Some people cheer. They're with Samuel on this one. But Bill, he doesn't like being challenged on his own show. You can see it in his face. That smirk is gone now. He's annoyed. "Come on," Bill says. "I think you're being a bit sensitive here. Hollywood is more diverse now than it's ever been. You're one of the biggest stars in the world. Seems like things worked out pretty well for you." Samuel stares at him. Just stares. The silence hangs there for a moment. Then he speaks. "So because I made it, that means there's no problem? Because I'm successful, everybody else should just stop complaining? That's what you're saying?" "I'm saying maybe there's a lot of complaining about problems that aren't as big as people make them out to be." Bill fires back. He's getting defensive now. "I'm saying maybe some people use race as an excuse when they don't get what they want." The audience reacts. Some gasps. Some uncomfortable laughter. Samuel's jaw tightens. This is the moment where most guests would back down, laugh it off, change the subject. But Samuel L. Jackson is not most guests. "An excuse?" Samuel says. His voice is louder now. "You think people are making this up? You think the data is lying? You think every black actor, every Latino actor, every Asian actor who talks about this is just making excuses? I think some people see racism everywhere they look," Bill says. He's doubling down. "I think some people are obsessed with being victims." The air in the studio changes. It's electric now, tense. The audience doesn't know whether to clap or stay silent. Samuel leans forward in his chair. "Let me tell you something, Bill," he says. "I've been in this industry for over 30 years. I've seen things you couldn't imagine. I've watched talented people get passed over again and again because they didn't look right. I've had directors tell me to my face that they loved my audition, but the studio wanted someone whiter. So don't sit there and tell me about excuses. Don't sit there in your comfortable chair with your comfortable life and tell me that racism isn't real." Bill shifts uncomfortably. He's losing control of his own show. "I never said racism isn't real," he says. "I'm saying that maybe, just maybe, not everything is about racism. Maybe sometimes people just aren't good enough." "Wow," Samuel says. He actually laughs, but it's not a happy laugh. It's the kind of laugh you make when you can't believe what you're hearing. "So now you're saying black actors aren't good enough? That's where we're going with this?" "That's not what I said," Bill protests. "You're twisting my words." "No, I'm listening to your words," Samuel shoots back. "I'm listening real carefully, and what I'm hearing is someone who doesn't want to admit that he benefits from a system that's been rigged from the start." The audience is fully engaged now. Some are clapping, some are silent. Everyone is watching this unfold. Bill's face is red. He's not used to guests pushing back like this. He's not used to losing. You know what your problem is? Bill says, and this is where he makes his biggest mistake. Your problem is you can't accept that maybe you're not always right. Maybe your perspective isn't the only one that matters. Samuel stands up, actually stands up from his chair. The audience gasps. Bill looks shocked. My perspective? Samuel says. His voice is controlled but powerful. My perspective is lived experience. My perspective is reality. Your perspective is privilege. And the fact that you can't see the difference is exactly the problem. Bill tries to recover. Sit down, Samuel. Let's talk about this like adults. Like adults? Samuel repeats. You mean like how you've been talking to me? Like I'm some child who doesn't understand how the world works? I'm done talking, Bill. Oh, come on, Bill says. He's trying to laugh it off now, trying to make it seem like Samuel is overreacting. Don't be so dramatic. This is a conversation. This is what we do here. We have tough conversations. No, Samuel says firmly. What you do here is invite people on your show and then disrespect them. What you do here is pretend you're some kind of intellectual while you talk down to your guests. What you do here is say inflammatory things and then act surprised when people get upset. Bill's producers are probably panicking. This is live television. This is not how these things are supposed to go. But Samuel isn't finished. You asked me on this show, Samuel continues. You invited me here. And then you sit there and basically tell me that the discrimination I've experienced, that millions of people experience, is all in our heads, that we're just complaining, that we're playing victims. You know what? I don't need this. I don't need to sit here and be insulted by someone who's never walked a day in my shoes. Bill tries one more time. Samuel, you're taking this way too personally. I'm not attacking you. Yes, you are, Samuel says. Every time you dismiss someone's experience, you're attacking them. Every time you tell someone their pain isn't real, you're attacking them. And I'm not going to sit here and take it just because you have a television show. The audience doesn't know what to do. Some people start clapping. Others sit in stunned silence. Bill looks at his producers off camera. He's lost. He doesn't know how to handle this. So what? You're just going to leave? Bill asks. You're going to walk off my show? Watch me, Samuel says. And he does. He takes off his microphone, just rips it right off his collar. The sound guy starts to come forward, but Samuel waves him off. He's already moving toward the edge of the stage. Samuel, come on, Bill calls out. Don't do this. We can talk about this. Samuel stops. He turns around, looks Bill right in the eye. We just did talk about it, he says. And you showed everyone exactly who you are. You showed them that you'd rather be right than listen. You'd rather make jokes than have empathy. You'd rather protect your ego than admit you might be wrong about something. That's not fair, Bill says. His voice is weaker now. Fair? Samuel says. You want to talk about fair? Nothing about this has been fair. From the moment I sat down, you've been trying to bait me. You've been trying to get me to lose my temper so you could have your viral moment. Well, congratulations, Bill. You got it. But not the way you wanted. Bill tries to respond, but Samuel cuts him off. I came here to talk about my film, Samuel says. I came here to have a conversation, but you couldn't help yourself. You had to go there. You had to push. And now you're upset because I'm pushing back? That's rich. The audience is completely silent now. You could hear a pin drop. Everyone is watching Samuel. Everyone is listening. I've been doing this a long time, Samuel continues. I've been on hundreds of talk shows. I've dealt with all kinds of hosts. But what you did tonight, Bill, that was something else. That was disrespectful. That was dismissive. And I'm not going to stand for it. Bill opens his mouth to speak, but nothing comes out. He's completely thrown. His whole show has been derailed, and he has no idea how to fix it. You know what the sad part is? Samuel says. You probably don't even realize what you did wrong. You probably think I'm the one being unreasonable. You probably think I can't take a joke, or I'm too sensitive, or whatever excuse you'll come up with. But the truth is, you crossed a line. And someone needed to tell you that. Samuel turns to the audience. I apologize to all of you, he says. You came here for entertainment. You came here for a good time, and instead you got this. But sometimes things need to be said. Sometimes you can't just smile and go along with it. Sometimes you have to stand up. The audience erupts. They're on their feet. They're cheering. They're clapping. Not for Bill, for Samuel. Bill is still at his desk. He looks small now, diminished. He tries to say something, but the audience is too loud. Samuel gives them a wave, a nod, and then he walks off the stage. The cameras don't know what to do. They cut to Bill. He's shuffling papers on his desk, trying to compose himself, trying to figure out what to say. His smirk is completely gone. He looks rattled, shaken. Well, he finally says, "That was unexpected." The audience has quieted down. Some people are still clapping. Others are just sitting there, processing what they just witnessed. "We'll be right back after this break," Bill says. His voice sounds hollow, empty. But the damage is done. In the span of just a few minutes, Samuel L. Jackson showed the world what it looks like when someone refuses to back down, when someone refuses to be disrespected, when someone says enough is enough. Bill thought he could control the conversation. He thought he could say whatever he wanted and his guests would just take it. He thought his platform gave him power, but he was wrong, because sometimes the guest is more powerful than the host. Sometimes the truth is more powerful than the platform. Samuel didn't go on that show to cause a scene. He didn't go there looking for a fight. He went there to do his job, to promote his film, to have a conversation. But when Bill crossed the line, when Bill showed his true colors, Samuel made a choice. He chose dignity over publicity. He chose self-respect over politeness. He chose to walk away rather than sit there and be insulted. And that walk-off, that moment when he stood up and said no more, that became the moment everyone remembered. Not because it was planned, not because it was staged, but because it was real. It was raw. It was honest. Bill tried to play it off, tried to make it seem like Samuel overreacted, but the audience knew better. The people watching at home knew better. They saw exactly what happened. They saw a host who thought he was untouchable get touched. They saw a host who thought he could say anything face consequences. In the control room, the producers scrambled. They had to figure out how to fill the rest of the show. Their biggest guest just walked off. Their whole carefully planned episode just fell apart. But that wasn't Samuel's problem. That was Bill's problem. He created this situation. He pushed too far, and he paid the price. Back on stage, Bill tried to continue. He brought out his panel. He made some jokes. He tried to act like everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. The energy in the room had changed. The audience wasn't laughing the way they usually did. They were distracted. They were thinking about what just happened. They were thinking about Samuel's words. Bill made a few comments about the incident, tried to frame it his way. "I guess some people can't handle a real conversation," he said at one point. The audience didn't react the way he wanted them to. They didn't laugh. They didn't clap. They just sat there. One of his panelists, trying to be diplomatic, said something about how tensions can run high when discussing sensitive topics. Bill nodded along, but you could tell he wasn't really listening. He was still processing, still trying to figure out what went wrong. But here's the thing Bill didn't understand. It wasn't about the topic. It wasn't about politics or social issues or diversity. It was about respect. It was about how you treat another human being. It was about recognizing when you've gone too far. Samuel had tried to engage. He'd tried to have that conversation. He'd explained his perspective calmly and clearly. But Bill kept pushing, kept dismissing, kept minimizing. And there's only so much of that a person can take before they decide it's not worth it anymore. The show ended. The credits rolled. The audience filed out. And everyone who was there, everyone who watched, knew they'd witnessed something significant. They'd seen the moment when a guest refused to play along, when a guest said no, when a guest walked away. Bill went back to his dressing room. His producers probably told him it would blow over, that people would forget, that it was just one episode. But they were wrong, because moments like that don't just disappear. They stick, they resonate, they mean something. Samuel left the building, got in his car, drove away. He didn't give any statements to the press waiting outside, didn't stop to answer questions. He'd said everything he needed to say on that stage. And his actions spoke louder than any prepared statement could. The thing about walking off a show like that is it's not a decision you make lightly. It's not something you do for attention. It's something you do when you've reached a point where your self-respect matters more than anything else, where being true to yourself matters more than being polite, where standing up matters more than going along. Samuel knew what it would mean. He knew people would talk. He knew there would be opinions. He knew Bill would try to spin it his way, but none of that mattered as much as the principle, as much as the stand he was taking. In those final moments on stage, when Samuel looked at Bill and told him exactly what the problem was, there was a clarity there, a truth. He wasn't yelling, he wasn't out of control. He was calm, direct, clear, and that made it even more powerful. Bill had tried to make Samuel look unreasonable, tried to make him look like he was overreacting, but it backfired because Samuel wasn't unreasonable. He was rational, he was justified, and everyone could see it. The walk to the exit felt long. Every step Samuel took was a statement. Every moment he spent removing that microphone was a choice. And by the time he reached the edge of that stage, by the time he turned back for one last look, everyone understood. This wasn't about a disagreement. This was about dignity. Bill sat there at his desk, probably running through all the things he should have said differently, all the ways he could have handled it better. But it was too late. The moment had passed. The damage was done, and Samuel was gone, out of the building, out of Bill's show, but not out of people's minds. Because that's the thing about moments like this. They live on. They get talked about. They get remembered. The studio audience walked out into the night, telling their friends what they'd just seen. The people watching at home called each other, texted each other, talked about it. Because it wasn't every day you saw something that real on television. It wasn't every day you saw someone actually stand up and walk away. Bill's show continued. He had more episodes, more guests, more conversations, but that night hung over everything. That night became the night, the one people brought up, the one that defined something about who he was and how he operated. For Samuel, it was about more than just one bad interview. It was about every time someone had tried to diminish his experience. Every time someone had told him he was wrong about his own life. Every time someone had acted like discrimination was something he imagined. In that moment, when he stood up from that chair, he was standing up for more than himself. He was standing up for everyone who'd ever been talked over, everyone who'd ever been dismissed, everyone who'd ever been made to feel like their truth didn't matter. Bill wanted to be provocative. He wanted to push buttons. He wanted to create controversy. And he got all of that, but not in the way he expected, because the controversy wasn't about what they disagreed on. It was about how he disagreed, how he treated his guest, how he refused to listen. The microphone Samuel took off and left on the chair became a symbol, a physical representation of saying no, of refusing to participate in your own disrespect, of knowing when it's time to leave. As Samuel drove away from that studio, as the lights of Los Angeles spread out before him, he probably felt a lot of things. Frustration, certainly. Disappointment, maybe. But also relief. Relief that he'd done what needed to be done, that he'd spoken up, that he'd walked away. Bill probably felt different things. Anger, perhaps. Confusion. Maybe a hint of regret. But mostly, probably, defensiveness. The need to justify his position. To explain why he wasn't wrong. To convince himself and others that Samuel had overreacted. But the audience knew. The people watching knew. They'd seen the whole thing unfold. They'd heard the words exchanged. They'd watched the faces. They'd felt the tension build and build until it finally broke. And when it broke, when Samuel stood up, when he spoke those final words and walked away, it wasn't dramatic in a manufactured way. It wasn't performative. It was necessary. It was real. It was the only response that made sense in that moment. The empty chair where Samuel had been sitting remained empty for the rest of the show, a constant reminder of what had happened, of the guest who wouldn't stay, of the conversation that went too far. Bill kept trying to fill the air, kept trying to move on, but every so often, you could see him glance at that empty chair. You could see him thinking about it. You could see the moment replaying in his mind. Because whether he wanted to admit it or not, something had shifted. Something had changed. He'd lost control of his own show. He'd pushed too hard, and someone had finally pushed back. Samuel's walk-off wasn't the end of anything. It was a statement, a line drawn, a moment of truth in an industry that often values performance over authenticity. And in that moment, authenticity won, truth won, dignity won. The show ended, the lights dimmed, the studio emptied, but the impact of what happened remained. It echoed through conversations, through think pieces, through social media, through every discussion about respect and representation and power. Bill had his show. He had his platform. He had his audience. But on that night, none of it was enough. Because Samuel had something more powerful. He had conviction. He had integrity. He had the strength to walk away. And sometimes, walking away is the most powerful thing you can do. Sometimes, the conversation that matters most is the one you refuse to have. Sometimes, the statement you need to make is made by leaving. Samuel L. Jackson walked onto that stage as a guest. He walked off as something more, as someone who wouldn't be diminished, wouldn't be dismissed, wouldn't sit there and accept disrespect just because a camera was pointed at him. Bill Maher stayed in his chair, stayed on his stage, stayed in his comfort zone, but he lost something that night. Maybe not ratings, maybe not viewers, but something more important. He lost the moral high ground. He lost the narrative. He lost the moment. And in the end, that's what everyone remembered. Not the jokes Bill tried to make after, not the excuses or explanations, but the image of Samuel L. Jackson standing up, speaking his truth, and walking away. That's what stayed with people. That's what mattered. Because in a world where we're often told to just go along, to be polite, to not make waves, seeing someone refuse to do that means something. Seeing someone choose themselves over convenience means something. Seeing someone walk away means something. The camera stopped rolling. The episode ended. But the impact continued. And somewhere, Samuel L. Jackson went home knowing he'd done the right thing, knowing he'd stood up, knowing he'd walked away with his dignity intact. That's more than Bill could say. That's more than the show could claim. That's everything.